Hello, everyone. I am Henri Makembe, CEO of Do Big Things, and welcome to Do Big Talks, where we discuss the latest trends in the ever-evolving world of digital advocacy. On today's episode, we'll be talking about social media organizing with Dr. Alan Rosenblatt, one of my faves. With over 25 years of experience, Alan is a pioneer in digital advocacy. He's a political scientist by training, and he's a professor at several universities, including GW, American, Johns Hopkins, and Baruch University in New York. He's also a partner at Unfiltered Media and Turner 4D. Alan, welcome. I am very excited to be here. We've been friends for a while, but I don't think everybody knows you. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Henry. It's really great to be here, indeed. And yeah, definitely always love having a chance to talk with you. I am a political scientist, as you mentioned, and I was a political science professor at George Mason University from 91 to 2000. And while I was there, the World Wide Web was born. 1993 was the first web browser. A friend of mine showed me the web browser and I went, oh, this is going to change everything. I had been doing research up until this point on how presidents use television to manipulate public opinion. And so the jump to the internet and World Wide Web and how that would play a role in political influence and political organizing and politics generally just jumped out at me immediately. From there, I started doing a lot of research. And in the spring of 1995, I taught the world's first college course on digital politics. I taught it for 6 years at George Mason, and then I've been teaching variations of it at several universities ever since. You rattled off the four where I'm teaching variations of it right now. More recently, I went from sort of an overarching digital political strategy kind of class offering where I also teach a course which is really honed in on social media as a public affairs tool, as a tool for campaigns. So been spending a lot of time in that. I also did a stint from 2007 to 2013 as running the online advocacy program at the Center for American Progress, where I literally created, designed, implemented, managed the enterprise level social media program there, which involved brand level channels, policy level channels, staff channels, and activist channels all working in concert. And I created a whole methodology for doing that. And I've since done a lot of work applying that to a lot of organizations, ranging from think tanks and media outlets down to advocacy organizations and universities.
So what you're saying is you're the perfect person to talk about this.
Well, I'm a good person to talk about this for sure.
Fair enough. So why don't we just get started and start with the question, being there that you were there from the beginning of the web, why do you think social media organizing is important in this particular moment?
Well, let's, talk big to begin with. And I think since this is big talks, there are basically three things that you're doing when you're online, or in a campaign generally, but especially when you're online. One is you're getting your message out there. Broadcast, narrowcast, you're pushing it out. That's sort of one-way communication. Second, you are mobilizing people to take action. Not everybody you reach takes action, a rather small percentage of it takes action. But the idea is they can sign petitions, they can send messages to Congress, they can register to show up at a rally offline. So it's not just online action, but they can do a lot of different things. But the third level is you can find your best activists and organize them into teams that you can rely on a daily basis to do work, to amplify your message, to mobilize other people, to reach out to their networks in order to bring them in as a trusted third-party messenger. Uh-huh. And the way I look at it is, if you aren't doing all three of those things, you're essentially leaving money on the table. If you're doing a program which is only doing broadcast, only doing getting your message out, you're missing the opportunity to mobilize action. If you're only mobilizing people to action, you're missing the opportunity to find the vanguard and turn them into consistent champions.
That's interesting. I really like that leaving money on the table. And because you have to be doing all three, I think when we talk about an integrated digital approach, digital program, really all three of those components are part of it. And since you've been doing it for a while, what have you seen evolve? How's it evolved since the beginning? Like, what are some of the things that stick out to you from 1993 when it started to now?
So there's a lot of different layers that you can do. You can look at the evolving technology, you can look at the evolving audience. I'll start with the evolving role of the digital strategist and the digital program within the advocacy and campaign community. When I first started out, every time I would reach out to a CEO or an executive director or president of an organization to talk about digital strategy, they wanted to hand me over to their webmaster. Now, at the time, the webmaster probably was the only person in the organization that understood this stuff. But over time, that started to change, and the webmaster became, a manager of a web platform, not a strategist. And when it came to the stuff that I wanted to talk to my to the executives and the leadership of the organizations about, I wanted to talk to them about how do you integrate digital and social into the strategy of the organization itself. And at that level, you need to be talking to the people who set the strategy, who lead the entire organization. Over the years, and I think partly facilitated by the fact that I do have a PhD in political science, which gives me a degree of gravitas, I was able to train directly a lot of CEOs and executive directors. I was able to do a lot of briefings and trainings for boards of directors of large organizations, and that was not common among my peers in the business, because they couldn't get, in many cases, had a harder time getting through that door. So maybe I was one of the first people through that door of getting at the senior level leadership in the organizations. Over the years, we've seen increasing evolution of the integration of digital and social media into the overall strategies of organizations. We've seen the expansion of the size of the digital teams. We've seen more centrally located roles. I remember during the 2004 Howard Dean primary campaign, campaign manager Joe Trippi set the digital teams desks outside the door to his office, so that every other department had to walk through the digital team to get to talk to Trippi. And that's an interesting physical structure of how to integrate digital into the whole program. So while we were just talking about integrating all aspects of digital together, this is a story about integrating digital with offline policy, fundraising, all the things that an organization, a campaign does offline, and integrating it that way. And so we saw the diversification and expansion of the staffing, bigger budgets, seat at the table, at least for somebody in that team at the decision-making process. And it looked like things are going great. But then when you scratch below the surface today, one of the things I still see is that smaller national organizations, some larger national organizations, and many, many, many of the state and local organizations that are doing a lot of the advocacy work that we spend so much time focusing on in our respective firms, are really still at the level that they were 20 years ago when I started doing this as a consultant. They're still, they only have one digital person. It may be an accidental digital person. They don't have somebody dedicated to social media. Or if they do, they have an intern or a junior associate dedicated to social media. There's still a lot of organizations that don't have either the capacity, technical capacity, or the vision at the leadership level to really elevate digital and social media. Now, I remember back in 2016, Pew did a survey where they asked people where they got all their information about the presidential candidates. And the answer was more people got their information about the presidential candidates from the presidential candidates' social media channels than from their email and website combined. Now, in my mind, putting a junior person to run your social media channel, given that it's that important primary interface with the public, is like putting an intern as your press secretary. Can you imagine, instead of Jen Psaki at the White House, a White House intern comes out to answer the questions of the press, and every time the press asks a question, the intern goes, "1 moment, walks off stage to get the answer from his or her boss, comes back out and gives it, takes the next question and repeats the process over and over again. It's simply ludicrous, right? And so you really need to put somebody running these programs who is at least a mid-level, if not a senior level of strategic role in the organization, so that they know what the messaging is, they know what the goals are, they know what they can and cannot say, and they understand the parameters and are able to work within those parameters without having to get constant authorization from above. That rarely happens even in the most advanced organizations with respect to digital integration.
So you mentioned a couple of things I think that I want to hop on one thing. You said that you feel that some of the organizations are still stuck to how they started 20 years ago. Can you tell me, what do you think is the reason why that is? Like, right, what is the most singular reason why you think they are stuck there and they haven't moved past it?
Well, this is something I come across working with state organizations a lot. They're awesome organizers. They're awesome at what they do. They just don't do digital, right? At the national level, a lot of these organizations have leadership that are awesome policy experts. They're awesome lobbyists. They're awesome traditional political influencers, but they're either older or just went on a career track that wasn't digital. And so they don't really understand the subtleties of digital, the roles of digital. Add to that the fact that what used to be commonplace and considered standard practice in digital has evolved. And so what we used to do online is different from what we do today. It used to be that the website was a destination and it was your public facing office to the world. Now, 85% of the people come to your website through Google or some search engine, Google, and they land on exactly the page they're looking for. They never see your homepage. They rarely click around to look at the rest of the stuff on your website. A lot of people are coming to your website because they're clicking on an action from an email or from an ad or from a social media post, and they're coming to a web page that looks like your website, that has action opportunities, but it has no navigation to any other part of your website because they don't want to distract you from taking the action. And so as a result, the role of your website has become really, really modest and very different from what it used to be. And the role of social media has expanded tremendously. At the same time that all that's happening, and I'm very strong on social media as a big tool for what you do. There's all these naysayers out there that talk about the toxic environment on social media, that social media doesn't look like the mainstream of America, and therefore we shouldn't use it. And that's like saying, okay, we're just going to cede social media on the progressive side to the conservatives that are just using it like wildfire to spread their rumors, which are clearly undermining getting vaccinated, wearing masks, surviving the pandemic, right? These are, seeding these platforms just because they're imperfect in venues, because you don't like them and because they're not perfect, because they're not exactly the right conversation you want to have, is like handing it over to the people that are destroying people and killing people with their policy pronouncements. So I think it's really, really important that we build into our organizations a realistic understanding of the role that digital and social plays in those organizations, and to enable and empower the teams that are doing that to do their work, and mobilize the entire organization to integrate their work with the digital team. I always say, if you're going to organize, going back to that theme, if you're going to organize using social media, using digital media online, the first people you want to organize is your own staff.
That's so fair. Yeah, I have a saying that it's no longer online or offline, and offline, it's inline, right? Because of mobile devices, people are constantly connected no matter where they are, no matter what they're doing. And I think even that mind shift alone in terms of like, oh, is this online organizing or digital organizing, offline organizing, social media? It's organizing. You're organizing people to take action. And right, and you now have different mediums to wish to reach them and get them to take action. So I've moved away from online and offline and being like, it's inline organizing, which means it's really organizing at all times, at all points.
Yeah.
So I want to wrap us up a little bit. I think, you've mentioned doing this for a while. You've kind of mentioned some of the things that folks have been doing wrong, but let's talk a little bit about some of the stuff that folks are doing right and what excites you, like, right? So what are one and two organizations that you think are doing social media organizing right, whether it's at the local level or at the national level? And then what are one or two things that excites you about, social organizing in the upcoming election cycle?
So I'll couple different examples. My business partner used to work at the Americans for Tax Fairness and left behind a program that's very well run now by his successor, Andrea Haverdink, who is just doing some tremendous work with regard to creating really compelling content that somehow makes taxes a sexy topic, and is creating and posting that content, but understands and is following through in doing the back channel organizing, identifying who the champions she has to tap into on the back end. She's gone through the whole process of working with teams and groups that she's created, teams and groups that she's become a member of, that other networks have put together, but really even moved deeper into having gone through that process, identifying the most influential influencers within those networks, and having one-on-one relationships with them, so that when she has content that needs to go, when she has actions that need to be taken, she knows who to reach out to with a direct message in order to get them to take action. So I think ATF is doing an amazing job, punching way above its weight. I mean, this is an 8-person shop that's doing some tremendous work. I also think, yeah, we'll leave it at that. That's a great example. There are others there, but some I can't talk about because of non-disclosures.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We don't want the lawyers to come after us.
Yes, no, not at all.
And in terms of what excites you, what are some of the practices that excite you for the upcoming cycle?
So I've been part of some grant making processes to help over the last few years, and we're really kicking up this year a lot, even more, of working with organizations who are trying to use social and digital technology to reach hard to reach audiences. And I think that that's a brilliant thing. I know that originally we had talked about, we were going to talk about what technologies to use, and everybody seems to want to focus on what's the new technology we want to use. And to be honest, that's the wrong way to look at it. I think we should look at what technologies is your audience using, and how can I use that technology to reach them more effectively. And when I want to reach them, I have to remember that I'm not just reaching them directly. Sometimes I'm reaching people using that technology who then turn around and reach the real people I'm trying to reach offline. So I'm using digital and social to reach influencers online who turn around and communicate with their local communities on the ground. That's particularly powerful. And what it means is that, yes, there are, on the one hand, we want to be using Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, the established platforms, LinkedIn, Snapchat, in ways that are that tap into the technology tools that they provide in order to best reach the audiences there. But then there are other platforms, like we worked with an organization last year that was using WeChat, which is a smaller chat messenger, which is particularly popular among Chinese-speaking communities. So if you wanted to reach Chinese-speaking communities in the United States and cut through a lot of the disinformation they were getting, you have to be on the platform where those people are, and you have to be talking in their language, and you have to be pointing to content that is written in their language and debunks the disinformation. So it's not new technology. WeChat's been around for a few years, but it's a new way to use it. It's reaching new audiences, and it's doing it in creative ways. And so that really excites me. The other side, the one technology that I find that is not used very much by other people that I use all the time is content analysis software, like Meltwater or Crimson Hexagon or Discover Text, which allows you to analyze what people are saying on social media. everything on Twitter, lots of stuff on Instagram, lots of stuff on Facebook, lots of stuff on YouTube, in order to see what people are saying about your issue and your candidates, which is really important. You got to listen to the audience, and also allows you to check on how well your organized volunteers are doing, especially on Twitter, since you can track lists of people, and really goes a long way towards giving you that intelligence that you need to know what you need to be saying, who's saying things on your behalf, who's saying things against you, and being able to understand what your position is with regard to the overall share of voice on your issue, in order to know what you need to do to increase your share, which I think in the long run is how you win.
So I think two things, if I can push on that a little bit.
Sure.
So talking about things like melt weather, we see that more and more of the internet is moving in walled gardens that you can't track. Like, right, you mentioned yourself, WeChat or WhatsApp, and that's where more and more you're organizing. How do tools like Crimson Hexagon help you when we know that the organizing goes on those walled gardens?
So obviously, we're not going to be able to get into those walled gardens unless we have a presence there and start meeting people and get invited into those communities. And you really have to do the hard work of organizing and research to do that. And let me just emphasize, many people think that digital and social is a way to create economies of scale that reduce the amount of work. It increases your reach, it increases your capacity, but you still have to do the work, or else it doesn't work, right? You still have to do that daily management of your communities. But I think that Twitter in particular, and I know Twitter gets a bad rap, but it's 25% of the population. It's all members of Congress. It's almost all the reporters. It's almost every organizer and super activist that's out there. It's a lot of leaders in the community, and it's a lot of rank and file citizens. And so a lot of ideas, a lot of messaging, a lot of arguments about different issues either originate on Twitter, or they migrate to Twitter and then spread fast on Twitter. So as a tool for figuring out what people are talking about now and what they might be talking about tomorrow, it's extraordinarily useful, even if it isn't representative of the population. So I use it as sort of a leading indicator, and then turn around and focus what I learned from those conversations and apply them to what I do on other platforms that are harder to penetrate using these kinds of monitoring tools.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. I think one thing that I want to expand on that you mentioned is you said that people have to use the tools and the technology that their staff and their audiences are using. I would go further and say they have to talk about the issues that they're talking about, right, before introducing the issue. I think a lot of things, a mistake that organizations make when they're trying to organize is only talk about the issue that they're organizing around. Like, right, well, talking to other folks about what they care about allows you to build that trust that when your issue comes around, you're more of a trusted resource as opposed to just a person.
I would take it one step further. I take it one step further. Not only do you have to talk about what they're talking about, you have to talk about it from their perspective.
Absolutely.
Totally. Because if you don't talk about it from their perspective, you're going to talk right past them.
100%. And I cannot end, I cannot think of a better way to end, is you have to talk to people from their perspective to get them to take action. Alan, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone else, thank you so much for joining us for another installment of Do Big Talks. If you have any topics that you'd like to discuss, you can reach us at info@dobigthings, and please stay tuned for future episodes. Have a good one, everybody.